Would you be a filmmaker today if you didn't go to USC?
Oh yeah, I was like making movies like way before USC. I mean, I started doing movies when I was 10 years old. My dad worked at Magnavox, and he brought home like an old video camera where it's like this huge video camera with a tethered cord and a separate deck. So actually the first thing I did when I was 10 years old was I adapted something, House of Frankenstein. I use that title, but I adapted like something that someone else had written and adapted it. And with my friends, we did this thing. I played Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, but someone else played Frankenstein. Someone played the Wolfman, but we actually did House of Frankenstein. And that was the first thing I did when I was 10 years old. And then I got into doing Super 8 films and cutting Super 8 films and that kind of stuff. And so I've been doing that since I was 10. So I kind of always knew from that point on, I wanted to, because it started out, I wanted to tell stories. And the problem is I would write these plays, but the plays were really elaborate and would require the audience to like run around in the woods with my friends to follow the play, which I guess would be kind of cool now, but at the time it wasn't very practical. So that's how I kind of got into filmmaking. Was I wanted to be able to tell the story, and it was not practical to bring the audience to us. So I needed to figure out a way to tell the story and bring it to them. And that's how I got into doing movies. And once I started doing it, and realizing like, oh my gosh, look what you can do. You know, you can do time compression, you can do all these things you can't do in a play. And then it became really exciting as a kid that basically your imagination just goes. And all those little shorts are ridiculous, of course, because you're kids running around making it, but it was a great way to learn. And because there was no YouTube back then, it's like none of those things were seen. So nothing can embarrass me because it doesn't exist in a way that anyone can see it. But I always knew from that point on that I wanted to make movies, and I was always into horror and science fiction and thriller, and those subgenres always kind of merged oftentimes, like they would kind of like blend together. It would be like a science fiction horror or horror sci-fi, or, you know, if it was thriller, it'd be like big horror elements in it. And so it kind of just gravitated and grew into that. And our first film I did with my wife, Laurence, my first feature, was a horror film, psychological horror film. And we really enjoyed it. And it kind of like led into our next horror film. And they've all been kind of different subgenres. We gravitate most, I would say, towards supernatural. Our first two were kind of like psychological / supernatural. So it's almost like the first one was 100% psychological, but there were supernatural occurrences because it was happening in his head. And the second one was much more Ghost of the Needle, was much more like, is it in his head or is it out there? And then our third film we did was a straight up supernatural ghost movie where we made it all, it kind of went all the way. And our last one we did, Echoes of Fear, also is a supernatural ghost movie. So, but even within that, there's a key element to the film talking about hauntings, and there's a debate she has with her best friend in terms of like, well, am I going crazy? Is it a ghost out there, or am I going crazy and seeing things? And her friend kind of tells her, it's like, well, if a ghost is going to reach you, it's going to be in your head either way. So I'm kind of like, I'm very intrigued by the idea of kind of breaking down this barrier of whether it's something in your head versus out there, and this idea that if it's in your head, it's not real. Well, all reality is in our head. So I mean, that's how we process the world.
That's true.
So it's like, to me, it becomes a very artificial borderline in a lot of movies where it's like, oh, is it in her head or in his head, and is he crazy, or is it out there and it's supernatural? Where I think, to me, it's more intriguing, like the blurred line in terms of, well, what that means between what's reality in the head and reality out there, when all reality is what you process inside your head.
Right. Didn't Philip K. Dick also kind of wonder about that?
Oh,
Not only
Philip K. Dick, yes.
into his own life too. Oh my goodness.
It's dark.
It's
See,
a ghost.